kia koutou I taimai I tēnei ata. Ka nui te hariko te kiti o koutou kāno I anō. Mi hoki kia tātou kaimahi o tēnei tari e awhi I te tuku te kaupapa nei. I tēnei wā he whakatuwhera tātou hui I te ingoa ki a tātou matui tarangi. Hei tō matu tarangi, whakamuimitia mātou hui mai I tēnei wā. Mauria mai tō mana tō araha I runga I a mātou, e awhi I a mātou, ki te whaia ki te ara tika, te ara pono, mō te mahi o te mahia, I mua I a mātou I tēnei ata. Mauria mai tō manaki tia I runga I a mātou whānau, he māwiwi, he māmai, he pauri ana I tēnei wā. He pātai atu I tō ingoa tapu mō aki tonu atu. Āmene.
Thank you, Michael, and welcome to Toro, our RPC representatives, and Mr Mohi from the Māori Committee, and look forward to your contributions. Are there any apologies firstly? I understand lateness for Councillor Bevan. Notices, we've got one notice in front of us today which is scheduled for an agenda item 8, that's from Paul Bailey. Are there any other notices? Councillor Dick.
Yeah, Mr Chairman, I'd just like to comment on the status of the Napier-Wairau rail proposal. Been a couple of articles in the Wairau Star over the last week or so that have indicated a state of confusion. Now, there was a very good meeting with Peter Reedy, Chief Executive of Kiwi Rail, and his senior executive about 3 weeks ago. Unfortunately, a couple of members of our team weren't able to attend, but the tone was very positive, and it set the scene for tying some stuff down, which largely relates to the cost of reinstatement of the rail line. But since then, it's been very difficult to contact the appropriate Kiwi Rail staff. So yesterday there was a meeting attended by Liz, Nick Cornwall, Tom Skirman, and Hamish McLeod from Works Group, and the outcome was that a letter will be prepared for Peter Reedy to be sent off probably early next week, in effect setting a list of matters that need to be dealt with and a prospective timeline so that we actually get things back on track again. In the meantime, I'll be talking to Councillor Wilson, and I think we need to say something to the Wairau Star to set the record straight up there.
Thank you, Councillor Dick. We'll treat that as a move to agenda item 5, item not on the agenda. Do you want to? We'll treat that as a leap in the agenda to item 5. That's fine. Do you want to talk about it later as well?
No, I don't.
That's okay. Thank you. Going back to notices, are there any other notices that want to be tabled now? I take it there are none.
Sorry, Chair, if I may, I just would like to discuss with the committee preferences around a briefing on Port of Napier capital matters for next week, just on timing on that, and also have a discussion about a special council meeting in relation to the Māori seat. So if I could do those
sure.
in the meeting.
Well, that's fine. Do you want to treat those as item 5s as well? We're jumping into item 5.
Yes.
Okay, well,
yes.
If you could raise that then, that'd be great. Now, I just want to identify that we do have that presentation from Napier City on the aquarium at 11 a.m, so we'll need to factor that in. And ditto with the Hawke's Bay Tourism. I assume, do we know who's attending?
Yes, Annie.
Just Annie, honour.
Annie definitely, and possibly George.
Possibly George. So that's at 12 o'clock. We'll try and meet that deadline for those that presentation. I'd also like your indulgence on decision item 6, recommendations for the Finance and Audit Committee. which we've run short of time to get the additional recommendations from that subcommittee meeting yesterday tabled in time. So we'll bring those later in the day, Leanne, and so we'll put those up on the board so we're clear on what they are, because the paper obviously didn't have time to produce for this meeting, so we'll defer that. So that's our item 6. Going back to item 2, conflict of interest declarations. Are there any conflicts of interest? Councillor Belford.
I'm declaring an interest in number 14, but I do intend to participate in the discussion.
Thank you. Any other declarations?
How can it be conflict of? Oh.
Well, he can decide whatever he likes as a conflict of interest. Well, it's up to the member to decide the extent of the conflict and the Well, are you pregnant, Councillor Belford? Look, let's accept that conflict as stated, and I'd like to now move to the minutes of the meeting of the 24th of May. I'm assuming everyone's got those in front of them. Now, they do contain an extensive dialogue that is relevant, so I'm assuming you've read those. In the first instance, has anyone got any alterations or amendments or corrections for that set of minutes? Page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12, and your public excluded at the back of that, so we'll do those later. No amendments to those or corrections. Do I have a mover for the minutes? Tom, yeah, Councillor Belford, Councillor Dick. Any matters arising from those minutes? Do I need to take a vote? I need to resolve the minutes first, don't I? Sorry. Yes. I'm having a shocker. Can I have, please advise me what your opinion of the minutes is. Those in favour of receiving the minutes, speak up now. Thank you. Any matters arising from the minutes? You've abstained from the minutes? Oh. Any matter? Can you record the abstention, please? No. Any matters arising from the minutes? Follow-up items. I
So,
wonder whether,
Chair, look, I'll
Mr.
just
Palmer,
just
can you
take
us through those.
just take them all as read. Look, all the actions have been actioned, except number 5, and I believe that Ms. Dundas will be addressing that matter during her presentation today. So happy to take any questions on any of those.
I was just going to suggest it's been there for over 2 years. You should probably scratch it.
I have spoken to her about it, and she has got a plan, and they're waiting for winter to pass and the gannet season to begin, as they want to do something out on the Cape Coast.
Whakakī Lake signing.
Just mine in relation to a special meeting on Māori seats and also briefing on Port of Napier capital issues.
James, I'm not hearing you too well. Could you extend your wand or bring it closer?
So it was the Port of Napier capital issues and also Māori seats special council meeting, 2 items to discuss.
When's that?
That was, so at the end of today's...
Sorry?
At the end of today's meeting, I wanted to have a discussion about councillor willingness to have a meeting.
We'll turn to agenda item 7, Remuneration Authority Consultation, and the Remuneration Policies. Who's going to take us through that? Is it Liz? Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Chairman, and good morning, committee members.
Which one?
This paper presents to you the Remuneration Authority's consultation document on future local government remuneration setting. And the purpose of the paper is really to establish your willingness or otherwise to develop a collective submission on the proposed policies, and if you wish to do that, we need to establish a system for that, so to ensure that the deadline of the 15th of December this year is met. The Remuneration Authority's consultation document is attached, and I'm assuming that most, if not all of you, have at least had a chance to have a read of it. The Rem Authority representatives will be attending the Zone 3 Local Government New Zealand meeting. That's fortuitously being held on the 2nd and 3rd of November in Napier. So it provides an opportunity for any councillors who wish to attend to be able to understand more about the Remuneration Authority's thinking and or ask questions of them to be able to do that. So, Mr Chairman, that's it very briefly. We're not at this stage necessarily asking for points of detail around the consultation document, but are really looking to establish your desire to make a collective submission and the timing of that.
Are there any views on this? I've got a few of my own, but they don't bear repeating. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question, Liz. When you say a collective submission, who are we collectivising with to make that submission, or intending to?
The 9 regional councillors, as opposed to individual council submissions.
Okay, yep.
Council law submissions.
Yep.
Just in question of the 9, would we not also include the chair of the RPC and the chair of the Māori Committee?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Do we want to actually make a submission? Is there an appetite for that?
Well, I would, I've read the paper, and what I would like is for someone to say what is, with clarity, what is the mischief, the problem we've currently got with the remuneration process we've got now, what are they intended to fix and why?
The sense of that, Liz?
No, not especially. To me, that would be a question that you would put to the authority when they're here. But yes, yeah.
That's what I'm asking. If we're going to make a submission to them, I'd like a clear statement as what is the mischief, the problem that's here currently? What is the problem that they're seeking to fix? You know, a clear definition of the problem. Why do they see it as necessary to fix the problem? And what other things? The rest of it flows from that. But I was just not sure that I've got to. Because with these things, every time you make a move one way, you create a problem somewhere else. So I'm just not. It seems to me a way of doing it because they want to do it.
Can I make a suggestion, and either we can do it or you can do it at your own behest? But what we've attached for you is not the whole of the document because it is so lengthy. We've attached part 3. So I'm wondering if the earlier parts of the document do perhaps provide that context, councillor, that you're seeking. And what we could do is send an electronic link, email it, and then see if you can, if that might answer those questions for you.
Councillor.
Mr. Chairman, my personal view is that remuneration of elected members has evolved over the years to a situation that I deem to be satisfactory and equitable. In particular, the move from meeting fees to salary, and I don't actually see that anything's broken. So if we were to make a submission, my position would be to support the status quo.
Any other thoughts on a submission? We've got two parallel and converging, if you like, opinions that perhaps this is a bit of an oversell or an overplay from a remuneration authority. That's certainly my view, is that why would we spend vast tomes of time on it when there's no problem really there? But others got a view?
I agree with Councillor Graham, but it seems to me that they're of a mind to do something here, and that's the problem here. And the other thing I notice in here, they see that where you've got a unitary authority, that they think that the regional council's work on top of the TLA is 12%. Well, I was thought, really? The other thing, when you look at what they've got down for regional councils, is talk about just operational things. But as you know, we as the regional council undertake quite a lot of work on behalf of the region, which we do different from the TLA. So there's quite a few factors here which I think are missing. And I was just, pretty concerned about the tone of this thing. And it seemed to me that people are off to go and do a job, and I didn't have a clear description of the mischief, the problem. So I like to see, what is the problem? When you define that, then you say, well, we need to do something. So I think we should take it seriously.
Quite, Councillor Hewitt.
I'd just note that from Central Hawke's Bay's perspective, given the large geographical area that I represent, that there is a requirement to have Central Hawke's Bay Rep being full-time, because I couldn't have another job and do what I'm doing down there.
We need to ensure that the role of the Regional Council is well stated, and the extent of its activities is reflected in their deliberations. Is that where we've landed?
Well, I think we should make a submission.
Yep. Okay, so we agree on a submission, Liz. We're unclear about what they're after, and we want to state and restate our vast empire of decision making and jurisdiction. Is that what we want?
Mr. Chairman, may I make a suggestion? To help guide Mrs. Hooper and myself, who would be drafting a submission on your behalf, could we perhaps have a small working group of councillors to give us input and feedback, please? Particularly those maybe who've already expressed some views today.
I wonder.
Councillor Barker, would you like to be a working group?
I wonder whether we. I wonder whether that can be transacted via email and it's simply circulated to everyone and there's a level of comfort with it, but leave it in your hands to pull their respective ideas together.
I think this is not something that I'm passionate about, except that I would, I'll be really concerned if Rick's concern that they're about to change something, and he's really experienced at reading into these things, and it's to the detriment of anyone sitting around this table. So from that point, I think we do need to have a little committee, and Rick needs to be on it, but perhaps, Fenton, would you go on it to just represent that? Because, you know, if they change the status of our two northern and southern regions to their detriment, it would be terrible, because they need to do it the other way, not in a negative, because their job is a lot harder than ours. Their travel, their time commitment in terms of travel around their regions is a lot harder than ours. We can go down to the coffee shop and have a lot, mostly, but they can't do that.
Some of us go down to the coffee shop.
Suggest Mike we go on there for
Sure.
because he's got more institutional knowledge than I have.
So, to be helpful, Chair, I'm happy to move them. The recommendation is stated.
Sure, thank you, Councillor. I think that's a good place to be. I wonder whether, in fact, we can bring it. We've got quite a bit of time because we've got to the 15th of December to lodge, so we could easily bring back a draft for our consideration at the next meeting. Happy to do that. So, taking the recommendations 1 and 2. We've got a mover, Councillor Wilson. Seconder is Councillor Barker. Any comments about that from anyone? Pretty straightforward. All those in favour of those resolutions? All those say aye. Thank you. Any abstentions or otherwise indicated? So that's fine. We're clear on that, Liz?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, Tora.
But all decisions that need justification, I suppose. So, do we have a framework of sort of like performance indicators for what councillors do, so that if the public, because I mean it is public money, if the public ask questions, we can say that certain things have been achieved.
No, you're a good point. Yes, we do have performance indicators. Every 3 years, people get to vote for us. And if we don't perform, we're out of here. Simple as that. To agenda item 8, which is Councillor Bailey's notice of motion. Now, some commentary on that from you, James, or someone else, Liz?
Thank you very much. Oh, no, you need to have it moved.
It's been pointed out to me by the Secretary that to proceed from here we need a motion to receive the... Do we need to receive the motion, do we?
Just accept the notice.
So we had a mover from Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Barker. All those in favour of receiving this notice of motion? Aye. Any to the contrary? No. The motion is received. What happens next?
You know what happens next. It's open for...
We can open up for discussion now, apparently. So, Liz, can you help us out there?
I'm happy to perhaps address some of the questions that Councillor Bailey has asked, that staff report back onto the next CNS committee meeting about progress of the review of Council's tendering policy. and when the Go Bus tender is due for renewal. We're in year 1 of a 9-year contract with Go Bus. Now that was done, that tender took place under New Zealand Transport Agency guidelines, requirements, which has a number of minimum standards but doesn't specifically specify a minimum wage. One of the things that our contract does have with them is an adjustment annually for inflation. Now that does include obviously things like fuel and running costs, but it also includes wage costs. However, that doesn't obligate Go Bus necessarily to, it doesn't mean that they're going to increase the minimum wage. We had some discussions with Go Bus as a result of the, we saw in the newspaper the people outside our building presenting the petition to you. They had, the union locally had called a stop work meeting in order to discuss that issue, and they had one driver turn up. So they, Go Bus themselves felt that it wasn't particularly an issue for the drivers here. However, you know, that's their interpretation of that. Look, I'm happy to take questions, and we can certainly provide more information to you. Perhaps one other point that I need to make is that with our bus contract, the major partner in that is NZTA with 51%. So any changes to the contract would have to be agreed by them, and they would, the first thing they would be looking at is the ramifications nationwide for any changes in terms of, you know, requirement to have a living wage or minimum wage.
Councillor Wilson.
So just in furthering that, is there any evidence elsewhere in the country that other, well, Go Bus and other regions or other providers are following this process?
First Union have been, are in the process of negotiating with a number of, with Go Bus, and so they have taken this action at other locations around the country.
Mr Chairman, if I could just add in terms of the previous request that we've had from councillors to look at this question across the board, what we have done is review our direct staff, and we've assured ourselves that all staff that work directly for the organisation are currently paid at or above the living wage. The only exception to that being...
Minimum wage or living wage?
Living wage.
Minimum wage.
Living wage.
Living wage.
It's $21.20, I think, off the top of my head. $20.20. The only exception to that are the students that we have on our summer program. I think typically they get paid $20 an hour, so 20 cents shy of the living wage. But all permanent staff are over that. When it comes to contractors, that is a more complex proposition. Obviously, we have a large number of contractors working for us and staff quite directly proximal to our operations, and you can think of the cleaners in the building, for example, and you can think of people that might be involved in tree planting or pest trapping or the like. And then we have then obviously products that are supplied to the council that have employees involved in them. So developing some policy around this is challenging, and we would be looking for some guidance today from councillors as to whether there is an appetite for us to go to that next step and really look at what would be involved at an organisational wide policy for contracted suppliers. We have hundreds of suppliers, as you can appreciate, for a wide range of goods and services.
Any other views, comments around that? Councillor Bailey, is there anything you want to contribute?
I have views and comments. You questions. I've got a view on this, but do you want to do questions first? Or
yeah, it is questions. Yeah, you're quite right.
Do we know what these bus drivers are getting paid?
No, I personally don't, sorry. And Mrs Redgrave, who's our transport manager, is offshore at the moment, so I can't ask her.
Is it the minimum wage? I don't know.
It's reported in the news media as being as low as the minimum wage.
And what is that?
$15.75 right now, $15.50.
$16, say.
Yeah, roughly 16.
Any other?
I'd like to hear from the movement.
Yes, sure. Okay, so we should go to the recommendations then. You've got to
which case
move the recommendations 1 through to 1 and 2.
Recommendations 1 and 2. So I obviously needs a seconder.
Sure, need a seconder for the Councillor Barker. So we've got a mover and a seconder. Councillor Bailey, do you want to comment on your resolution?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Look, when I was approached by the by First Union to accept this petition on their behalf, and this is, to me, this notice of motion is merely presenting this to this committee for consideration. It begged a number of questions, though, which I've asked as part of my recommendations. James has commented on the review of council's tendering policy, which is fine. He'll get feedback on that in due course. The question about when the GoBus tender was due for renewal and it being possible to renegotiate it again, Ms Lambert's answered that question, I believe, to my satisfaction already. But to me, what that means is that, because the challenge that First Union had was that when they were trying to negotiate with GoBus were turning around saying they cannot talk about giving any more money to the workers because the councils are saying no, because it's impossible because of their contractual obligations, which in some respects is fair enough. But as Ms Lambert has noted, whilst we're in year 1 of a 9-year contract, there is an annual adjustment that can be made. So it is possible for First Union to negotiate with GoBus and that to filter back down to us for consideration. So I'm happy with that position in terms of it's now up to GoBus to do their roles as a union representing their workers. Therefore, I again, whilst we've answered the questions, I think it's just putting the process into place. So I would dearly like to support our bus drivers to be on the living wage of $20.20 an hour. One of them or some of them take my kids from Napier to Hastings to school and back every day, and I would like to know that they are well remunerated for the role that they do and looking after my children and keeping them safe and secure on that trip every school day. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barker, do you want to speak at this point?
Well, yes, I do. I support this motion, but I do feel it doesn't go far enough. I think we should have a statement of intent, not just to examine the issues, and I'd feel happier with it. That there was a statement of intent that it is that we do move to making the minimum living wage the basis on which we offer people who are directly contracted to us, as a condition of the contract. Let's face it, these industrial relations policies have been set up to drive wages down. We put out tenders, and tenders are put out on the basis for one of the main considerations is the cost. So people, if they're going to win the tender, have to have the lowest costs. And because there's no regulated wage for bus drivers, the minimum wage becomes the maximum wage. And so if you're going to win a tender on the basis of price, then you have to tender on the basis of the cheapest labour you can get, which is the minimum wage. The minimum wage should be called the maximum wage. So they have to tender on that in order to get the work. If they turned up here and put a tender in for a bus driver, as you would pay in Australia, $35, $40 an hour, they'd never win the tender. If they would do what you do in Australia, pay people overtime rates for work on weekends, they would never win the tender. So the point is, the system is, by tendering system, is set to drive the wages down to the lowest possible denominator you can. And we just have to make a moral decision whether we find that acceptable or not. And I don't. I think someone who drives a great big bus like that, which is a guided missile around the place, it is a guided missile, can run people over, to be on the bus carrying people's lives in their hands, should be paid a wage which is commensurate with it. And I personally think, $20.20 is less than what should be paid, personally, for the job. But that's where I stand on the issue. Make no mistake about that. I think the system is wrong, where it's geared up to drive the wages down to the lowest possible minimum you can do.
Councillor Graham, do you want to say something?
I do. I have a lot of sympathy for what Rick has said. There are several parts to this, isn't there, really? There's, it would be very difficult to have a couple of kids and a mortgage on $16 an hour, which is $32,000 a year on 2,000 hours. It would actually be quite difficult, and I'm very conscious of this, employing people as well, to have a decent living on $20 an hour, which is only $40,000 a year based on 2,000 hours. So, you know, we do have a situation in New Zealand, and it has been driven over the last 15, 20 years, driving down wages, which is a concern to all of us, I think. And so that's just something that I just want to put on the table. But the other side of this coin is we don't want to be caught like the Blenheim growers were caught. You know, they, in the end, if there's a misgiving here, it'll come back to us as the final employer. Nobody will care about the busing contractor. They'll care about us, just like the Blenheim growers got caught when the contractors were ripping off their staff. And I'm not saying our guys are, but employing people at $16 an hour to drive a bus with people on it just seems a little bit low to me. Not a little bit, a lot low. And if the system is forcing that to happen, then I agree with Councillor Barker, the system is wrong.
Any other comments from anyone on this matter? Yeah, Councillor Dick.
Well, Mr. Chairman, 1.2.3, I think that needs to be given. The answer to that needs to be given consideration after Mr. Redgrave returns and is able to look at it. It is not a simple issue because the parameters and rules for tendering for bus services are very much prescribed by NZTA, who is the largest funder of this. So I have no objection to that being given consideration, but I think we're going to have to wait to get an answer to give it proper consideration. The other point I'd make is that the Regional Transport Committee will be interested in this, but at the same time, it is the council who employs the contractor. So it's with the council that the principal responsibility lies.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Walker, please.
I should give my maiden speech, seeing I'm a newcomer to this committee. But yeah, just because I'm ignorant, do we have a quadruple bottom line sort of value system in this organisation? Because as a representative of our community, I think, you know, we should have a high social threshold in terms of what we're trying to do to uplift the well-being of the people in the area. And so I support the thinking that we should really be intolerant of pushing down wages. In particular, I support the fact that bus drivers have a hell of a lot of responsibility on their shoulders, a lot of lives, you know. We put our children's lives in their hands, so I think we need to take this seriously and do the right thing. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Belford.
Well, I support this proposal, and I would support going as far as Councillor Barker has recommended. A living wage is by definition a living wage for everyone. It's not a living wage for some people that we think deserve it and other people we don't quite think deserve it. It's either a living wage for all or it doesn't have any meaning as far as I'm concerned. And so I'm fully supportive of standing behind that as a broad principle for all of our tendering. And I think we should proceed with at the moment, we're simply asking for further reporting on this, which is kind of tame, but at least it gets the ball rolling. And if someone were to challenge me as an elected official for supporting that all of our employees earn a living wage, I'd welcome the attack.
Thank you, councillors. Before handing back to Councillor Bailey on this, I just comment in terms of the next steps, and obviously there's some expression today around some principles that we'd like to pursue. I'm pleased we haven't segued this recommendation into something broader at this stage, for the reason that it's clear there are a number of complications, implications, etc. for taking this, going down this road. There are implications, for example, for the Transport Committee, NZTA approaches to this. We need to understand that fully, but more broadly, we need to understand fully the implications across the board, and particularly the bottom line for us financially. Mr. Palmer's identified that we'll come back at the meeting in December, James, and now we've picked up these sentiments. I'm sure that will find its way into that paper. So a broad approach to tendering, to our policy and principles on the living wage generally, picking up on some of the things that Mr. Walker had to say around where we rely on this. So I'm relying on that December report to capture today's discussion. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. Just like to thank fellow councillors for support around the table for the motion and the discussion that has been had. I'm greatly encouraged by that. In terms of James's having a steer for the way forward, I totally get the argument that if we were looking at a tender, say for example for our stationery supplies, we would struggle to control what wages were paid to the workers who produced the stationery supplies. However, that should come in under probably our ethics policy. Whereas if we've got a direct employee like we have, say for example, our tender for the cleaners, the cleaners here, then that's another issue altogether. So I see quite a distinct distinction between those two particular issues, and that may help to clarify matters for you, James. But like I say, thank you for your support. I'm sure that GoBus will be, that the First Union will be very pleased to view the video and hear the comments that would be made today in support of what they're trying to achieve for the workers that they represent. And I'm sure that any other staff that or workers that are contracted to us via third parties will be greatly encouraged by the discussions we've had as well.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll move to the recommendations 1 and 2. All those in favour of those recommendations say aye. Aye. Those against? No abstentions. The recommendations will proceed to Council. We now move to agenda item 9.
Sorry,
Councillor.
I mean to note that I understand that one or other, or more than one of the Wellington councils have been looking at the issue of paying the living wage to contractors. So some advice from them as to how they've progressed would be valuable.
Well, that's a good point, I think, Liz. To understand what's happening nationwide would be quite useful in that paper. Turning to item 9.
I've got these now if you want to go back.
You want those? What is the time?
9:50.
10 to 10.
10 to 10. We've got plenty of time. I think if we... Thank you, Councillor. I think if we... Can we move to... I'd like to knock this one off because it's likely to be a significant conversation, or needs to be a significant conversation, and that's agenda item 9, the long-term development process. I know it's an update, but I think we need to fully understand our major piece of work for the year. Now, who's going to lead us in there? We've got James and Jess.
Perhaps I'll start off, Chair. So there are an awful lot of moving parts in here, as you'll appreciate, and an awful lot being done in a short period of time to prepare for the long-term plan. In paragraphs 2 right through to 11, the major components of that are listed. Probably the most significant current focus is what is under number 2, and that's the all of council project reviews. Every budget holder in the organisation has now reviewed their current budget and filled in a spreadsheet, which is a vast and complex spreadsheet, as you can imagine, covering all of our budget areas with information about current cost pressures, current FTEs, opportunities to reduce cost and where cost pressures lie, any programs that could possibly be on the table for cessation. All that information is going to the executive next week. We have 2 days off-site at Greg and Rachel Hart's farm, Mangarara, where the executive is sitting down for 2 days going through all of the financial information across the organisation to identify what we can bring to you by way of options to meet our over $2 million budget shortfall next year, and also to bring forward to you areas where you might wish to make further investments. So that is the current focus for the exec and budget holders within the organisation. In parallel, of course, the capital structure review is continuing apace, and the report writing has begun to prepare that report for the council. We also have a series of functional reviews going on across the organisation. Presently, they're all listed in 4.1 to 4.8. Happy to take any questions on those. Jess, I might hand to you on the rates and revenue review.
Yep. Morning. So there's a few different work streams that are going on at the moment in terms of reviewing all of our revenue and a full review of how we rate, and would like to bring that information to you at the workshop on the 11th of October. It's going to be quite tight in terms of turning around and getting the information ready, but we think that's the right time to bring it forward in terms of getting it into the LTP and just getting your appetite really for making any changes or looking further at the data. So that will cover off really a high-level review of whether or not you'd like to consider moving towards calculating general rates on capital value as opposed to land value, and that will have quite a significant impact in terms of there will be winners and losers in that scenario, and that's something that we'll model out and we'll bring to you at that workshop. Looking at modelling the impact of moving towards a model where we fund our day-to-day operational expenses through rates, revenue, and that would really be looking at using investment revenue for income for larger transformational projects. So that's a model that a lot of other councils are working on, and it's something that I think would be interesting to get your view on. The timing of rates, and I think this has been mentioned in the Woodham review. So at the moment we pay the GST on rates before we recover them, and a lot of the feedback from the girls on the rates team actually the last couple of days since the rates invoices have gone out, there's a little bit of a confusion around some of the dates and when the payments are due, because we do have a due date and then payment dates are quite far in between. So that's something we could have a look at in terms of clearing up. And I think that's quite easy to enforce if we wanted to make a change there. Looking at all of our fees and charges, user charges, public and private splits, we'll be having a look at that and what some of the financial impact would be in changing some of those. So we'll present you the options and give you a view to provide feedback. Third-party funding and partnership opportunities. I think that's something that should be of interest to us as we go into the LTP, whether or not we can leverage greater third-party funding than we currently do and what the options available there are. And then debt funding, which is something that we'll be having a look at in terms of that sort of ties into our capital review as well, how we fund activities through our own balance sheet. And we may find that, well, we probably will find through the capital review that there's ultimately going to be some shortfall in investment income in the short to medium term, and there are some options around how we can fund different activities through the council. So that's...
Thanks. Cheers. Councillor Hewitt.
You happy to take questions as we go? So I'm just wondering, I'm not sure if it's you, Jess, or James, when you speak about 5.5, will that cover off the potential to be charging more for the public-private benefit for the stock banks, for instance?
Absolutely.
Yep.
So that's going to be quite a detailed piece of work that'll come to us?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I look forward to that one.
There's actually a good piece of work being tabled with the Capital Review on that, which demonstrates that very well.
Jess, I have a couple of questions. I'm interested in the difference between the capital and land to assess the rates. For instance, how do you value the capital of someone's house? So that, I guess that's what it is. It's the actual improvements, isn't it?
That's right.
So
it's the land value plus the improvements.
And we don't
equals
do
the
that,
capital
right? We just
value.
go just land.
Just land, that's right. And it would only be the general rate portion of the rates
So
calculation.
the general
that
rate
would move.
portion.
Yeah.
And I'm interested how you get that. I suppose you get that.
Use QV data. It's just as the TAs do.
Yeah.
So that data is readily available.
So they do capital value at the moment.
Yes, they do.
Sorry, I'm
Yes, they do.
on this.
And some regional councils already rate on capital value as well. So we've just chosen as a council historically to only focus on land
And
value.
that means the wealthier pay more. Does it? Does it work
Well,
out
I
like
think
that?
I haven't seen the data yet, but my assumption would be that it would probably move the impotence towards the urban population and as opposed to the rural. So I think when we set our rating up 20 or so years ago, it was more focused on the services that we delivered were predominantly for rural residents as opposed to urban, and I guess a lot of what we do now is more urban focused. So it's probably something that we should consider.
Yeah, no, I'm really keen to see how it works out and how what it looks like. Really keen. So
Would
that'll
it
come-
not strike at Havelock landowners, probably, homeowners more than
I don't know.
land value?
Correct.
Yes, it probably
Correct.
will.
It probably
So
will.
there'll definitely be quite big swings, outliers who are sort of winners and losers, and then there'll be a lot of people who sit in the middle that there won't be a significant
so
change.
I'm really keen to see that exercise.
Having said that, it will be entirely over to you how you
Exactly.
design the ratios.
Yeah.
So you could have 10% capital value and 90% land, or the inverse, or anything in between.
And we could
So-
introduce it over a period of time, or we could cap increases, so we could say anybody who had more than a 40% increase, we won't enforce that fee on them straight off the bat.
Okay, look forward to it.
Just the last comment from the Chief Executive through you, Chair, though, it won't be totally over to us. I mean, we need to understand the where the costs need to lie where they fall, if you like. So, I mean, we obviously need a bit more background than just it's totally over to us.
Oh, look, no, absolutely, and you'll get analysis in terms of what the impost is on different, and this is why it's a substantial piece of work, because obviously the rates levied on any given ratepayer are highly variable across the region. So we have to do the analysis so you understand how the burden might fall on different scenarios, and what we anticipate is this will be a little bit iterative with you. You may suggest that you want some scenarios modelled up, and we'd need to go away and run the numbers for you.
So I'll provide as much analysis as we can for the workshop, and we'll provide like a sample of properties throughout the region, and then if you'd like more detail on specific suburbs or areas of the region, we can go away and we can do that if there's an appetite to move forward with looking at it further. Possibly.
Just to, although flesh that out a bit, it's not, from my point of view, it's not so much who's going to pay more and who can afford it and who can't. It really is got to be based on our services going forward, and as I say, where the costs lie. Yeah. So
Look,
we've
I
got to
think
be quite careful of this. I'd be really reluctant to think that if you had more money in the bank, you had to pay more. That doesn't sit with me.
No, look, I understand that, Councillor. One of the challenges we have, of course, and you can take water quality as a great example, there's a large number of people in Havelock North who have strong opinions about the tuki-tuki, for example, and then there's a question about who carries the burden for cleaning up the tuki-tuki. Is it solely farmers in the upper catchment? As you might say, they are the exacerbators. On the other hand, you might say that those who want to swim down at River Road at the end of Tamata Estate, who come from Havelock North, are the beneficiaries. So do the beneficiaries pay? Do the exacerbators pay? What's the relative mix, etc.? Well, exactly, and what is pollution, and is a background level of nitrogen loss from a property all pollution, or is some of it pollution and some of it's acceptable? It's a complex exercise to determine who benefits essentially from our services. Some areas it's very, very clear, but as we've gone more into things like urban water quality, water quality for swimming and the likes of those sorts of things, it becomes less and less clear absolutely who our services are delivering to. So that's just something we need to work through and will require some judgment on your behalf.
I don't want to go down too many rabbit holes on this paper because we've got plenty to go down, but Councillor Belford is wanting to say something, I'm sure.
Just looking at my ridiculously low rates statement last night from this regional council, and the one thought I have about this is that the point that Fenton is raising about being clear about what are the services we deliver these days. I have an itemization of 8 or 9 things on my bill, most of which actually aren't done for me, but that are itemized and I pay for them. And if we're going to move to a system that hikes that payment on whatever basis, whether we add capital in or however we do it, it seems to me we also need to think through our explanation of what each ratepayer is paying for, and make that a lot more clear and maybe simplified, so that if I get a bill for, I think my bill was $300 and some dollars, if I get a bill for $600, fine. I just want to know, I want to have some satisfaction, I guess, that, yeah, I see the things that I'm paying for make sense to me. And if it's improving water quality in the lower Tukey, so be it. I just want to see it clearly identified, and that would be a huge part of our communicating our overall picture.
So look, absolutely, Councillor, and can I make the observation that our ability to communicate that goes heavily to the way we structure our finances and our functions, and that goes to things like the way we structure our LTP in terms of where does the money go, what are the services it delivers, and what are the outcomes it delivers. And at the moment, it's very activity driven, not necessarily very outcome driven. And it's also, we've got a very complex set of financial arrangements which are quite difficult to communicate. Can I assure you that the communication of all of this, particularly in terms of the consultation document for the LTP, is going to be a significant focus for you, particularly January, February next year, as we finalise all of that communication material and then go out for the LTP consultation.
Thanks, James. Look, I really do want to focus in on this is a process paper essentially, and what it does identifies where you can turn your minds to each of the issues that have been raised so far. It's a paper that I'm wanting to move today, a recommendation on. But first, are there any other questions of the staff around the structure proposed for the next? Councillor Hewitt, you've got a question on that. I'm hoping that the Māori Committee, for example, can also ask where their place in the sun is in this flowchart as well. I'm sure Mr. Mohi is going to ask me that now.
So James, perhaps you can talk me through the meeting schedule. And I see we've dropped council meetings from 11 down to 8. I'm a bit concerned about that maybe we could have workshopped this first, rather, because obviously we're up on, we're live, but I mean,
Councillor, can I
logic
assure
for
you
this
that
and-
this is only proposed. This is just a working draft at this point in time that we're seeking feedback on. One thing that we have noted is that the frequency of meetings that we are having is putting a great burden on not only councillors but also staff. And so as a starter for 10, we've suggested next year you might want to consider moving council meetings to every 6 weeks and the RPC also to every 6 weeks. Currently, both are happening on a monthly basis, and between the two of them, and plus your committee meetings, that has been a pretty heavy burden this year. So we're just trying to space things out a bit more, and obviously there is a really big focus on the LTP in the first half of next year as well. So that's a starter for 10, but we're really keen for feedback on that.
So one of my concerns, and it was echoed just with a discussion earlier, but if you're going to drop a meeting, I mean, January for a start, because no boards meet in January. It's a good month for keep January and July clear.
So it is the 31st of January, you'll know.
I know. Anyway. Kids are getting back to schools and...
Well, for the bulk of for...
And
30 days
yeah, I know
of January.
that's my feedback. But also, I think the meetings, I'm not concerned so much about the RPC, but the regular council meetings are quite important. And well, in terms of being included, I'm hearing a mumble here, because that'll make the meetings a lot longer, Alan, if we're meeting less. But also, there's a group of councillors around the table who meet quite regularly, just by themselves, and I'm obviously excluded as the Central Hawke's Bay rep from that. So you
Councillor,
need to be.
can
Hang on, no, we're
go
having
there,
our say
please?
here, and it wasn't given the opportunity to do it in a workshop. So we need to be keeping meetings more regular, not less.
Look, let's...
Could I just make a comment? On the point that Debbie has made about having a monthly meeting, I agree with her, absolutely. The idea of going to 6 weeks is just simply, in my view, weaken the influence governors have on this council. And the other point that I would make as well is that there are regularly things that come up which need some attention, need some comment, and if we don't have a regular monthly meeting, we're stuck. And I just think there should be this having a monthly meeting, the last Wednesday in every month, absolutely clear, we all know what we've got, works. And I don't know where the idea came from to change it, and I just want to make it very clear, I disagree with it.
Okay. So really
I endorse that
happy to take the feedback on it. Look, it came at my suggestion, and one of the reasons was we've increased the frequency of the RPC meetings to monthly, and it may be that you want to dial that back. But I am telling you quite clearly that now between all of our committees, and of course we've now got even some new standing committees. Well, we've certainly got one in terms of drinking water coming forward. And because of the LTP extra meetings we need to have in the first half of next year, that we're putting quite a lot of strain on the system in terms of the pace, and staff are only finishing one meeting before they're starting to prepare for the next one, etc. And we're chasing our tail all the time in order to provide you with advice. And I do hear also concerns about the quality of the advice, and you want better papers and more options and all those sort of things. And we just really struggle to find time to stand still. Having said that, if we can create more space for the other committees and keep the council on a monthly meeting, then no problem.
Councillor Belford.
This chart seems cluttered by a lot of Napier City Council meetings. What's the point of that?
So the reason for that is because of their building. They have to vacate their building. They have asked whether they are prepared, whether we are prepared to share our council chamber with them for them to hold their council meetings, which is
an appropriate rental.
So we look in the spirit of support and cooperation of the very unfortunate circumstances they're in. We've agreed with that idea, and only on the basis that it doesn't impact on your meeting schedule. It's only just down here, so we all know that the
it makes this look a little more intimidating than it needs to.
Understand, but it's really just so everyone understands the chamber is occupied on that day. It has no particular bearing on your obligations.
Can we bug the meetings?
I think that's a great idea. Let's move on. So we've had the feedback around the agenda so far. I'm not so vexed about 6 weeks, but however, it sounds as though there's a high principle here to be upheld. So you'll come back, James, with an amended version based on that commentary. Councillor Dick.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment. I think that part of the reason why everyone's getting overloaded is that at times, James, I think you're taking on work at the request of this council that, in my mind, has not necessarily got great priority. And I think from time to time, you should be saying, well, hey, I'm busy, and is this absolutely essential? I'd take, for example...
Councillor, can I just take you back to the comments I made before and just be really clear. The organisation is absolutely at its maximum capacity right now, doing everything that we're delivering, and hopefully I have been signalling that reasonably consistently. You're right, we've got an awful lot on, and part of the point of this paper was to let you know that we are fundamentally reviewing every single part of this business as comprehensively as we can, which is putting a huge burden on staff right now, but it is because we have this one in a triennium, one every 3-year opportunity to reset, and there is a need to look at everything. So we're going to have a bit of a hump over the next, particularly 9 months, as we develop, consult on and finalise the LTP. So for the next 9 months in particular, we're going to be pretty maxed out. But come 1 July next year, I hope that you have a long-term plan which meets your aspirations and expectations, and the organisation can get locked and loaded behind that, and we all agree what the priorities are, and we get on with the business for the next 3 years. So there is a bit of a hump here, and I'm working with the staff to manage that, and I'm giving them that undertaking that this is a bit of a hump, but once you have all agreed what your priorities are, and you've decided how you're going to fund them, that they will be left to some extent to get on with doing the business, obviously with appropriate reporting and oversight by you, but we won't be into a rolling maul for the next 3 years of new ad hoc initiatives. We will have agreed, this is the strategy, this is the plan, this is what we're going to deliver, and we just get on and do it.
Good. Look, we're going to move on more rapidly than this. There's a couple more questions, but then we're going to move to the recommendations. So, Councillor Hewitt.
Just one last point. If you don't...
Other than Councillor Dick.
If you don't have monthly meetings, you're going to have decision-making backing up. And so I think that's the one thing that's imperative. Adjustments in other areas, fine.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Hewitt.
James, I appreciate your pushback, and I'm not wishing to increase the workload, but I just would like to note the importance of the when we have site visits out in the region, and they've been lacking this term, and they are really important. So scheduling them is...
Any other issues on the scheduling? Good point, Councillor. Any other issues on that particular? So there's a clear brief to Councillor Graham. Sorry, Tom.
One of the big issues which is facing a lot of councils around the region is how they meet their obligations and in regard tēnā te whenua. And so we're not the only council that's having these issues. It's every other council has as well, and so we've increased as an example, the planning committee from 2 monthly to 1 monthly. So that's just huge in itself. But not only that, James and I, so the regional planning committee is one thing, put that aside. And as everybody knows, I think it's got some issues because James and I are spending a lot of time dealing with hapu groups individually as well. So, despite the fact that the Regional Planning Committee is supposed to govern all the rivers, that's not the way that mana whenua are looking at this. So, we get demands for meetings from mana whenua, whether they've been Wairoa or mana ahururi, or that are very demanding, and I particularly enjoy that. That's the concept that I would rather go for. But on our staff, it is very, very taxing. So we've got to figure out a way how we deal with tēnā te whenua that is on a basis that they enjoy and that we can cope with.
Thank you, Councillor. Good points, and thus the need to rationalise our agenda for the particularly early part of the next year, and thus my less concern about a 6-week interval. But however, we've heard you on that. Councillor Belford.
As one in favour of the sticking to the monthly, a change to the agenda that might be worth considering is we have this division between decision items and information items, and we spend a large portion of the time at our council meetings discussing the information items, and perhaps council meetings should be reserved for decision items, and we should be expected to read information items at our leisure and have some, maybe a bit more formalized or systematized way of, if we see something in those kinds of documents or reports that trigger concern, we have a way to raise the flag on that, but we get them off the agenda of the council meetings, and the council meetings could be half-day or whatever.
Well worth considering, and I now want to move this information item. And I've got a seconder from someone, I hope. Mr. Walker has seconded that. And I want to speak to it because of its relative importance, or its great importance to us. You'll see there the schedule of meetings. We've had our first LTP workshop meeting in August. We've had our dialogue in September. A lot of activity with particularly the capital review. And then we've got our respective meetings in October, workshop 2, workshop 3 in November, and then 2 in December. So probably the most intense piece of work that we need to get our heads around ever particularly in this 3-year period. So that's going to need some tight discipline from us all. And I take on board Tom's comments around the decision-making schedule we need to engage in, and the information management processes we need for that. But look, from my point of view, this is the most far-reaching process and has the widest implications for the region. I would suggest, given what you are about to hear in regard to the capital review process, that we will. This is a 30-year horizon in many respects. So that's how important I'm seeing this. In regard to that capital review process, we're wanting to move as fast as we can to get councillors up to speed with progress to date in advance of the publication of the report from the capital review panel, and because of the significant implications in it. So, James, I understand that we're looking to make those presentations in those October workshop time, that October workshop time slot, and that becomes very important. But overall, we've got some tremendous far-reaching decisions to be made in terms of producing a document for the LTP that we can take out to consultation. From my reading of progress to date, this will be a radical departure, both on our service provision, the way we gather rates and revenue, and all sorts of investment financing for the organisation. We've got on the table a major reconfiguration of the way we deliver services, so it's going to really tax us substantially over the next 3 months to get a draft document in place that captures all of these strands of work. Can I, do you want to make a comment, Mr. Walker, about this as a seconder?
I think we've got to acknowledge that we're in a period of great change at the moment. We've got a relatively new CEO, and I think it's a great thing that he's reviewing what we're doing. Councillor, our chair, has raised the issue about the tangata whenua issues. That's certainly bringing in new things, work streams. We can't operate in business as usual mode. I think we've got to have a look at what the scope of the work is needs to be done, and also what the concerns of the ratepayers are. We've got some big issues out there, so if resources need to be put into those areas, that's what we have to do. So I support the recommendations.
Any other comments from anyone on this issue? So we'll have a redrafted schedule coming forward, and when are we looking at that? That'll be tabled at the next meeting?
Yes, it will. We'll provide further guidance on the 11th of October on the schedule coming forward, Chair.
We've got the recommendation to receive and note the report. All those in favour, say aye. Those against? No? Was that a no? No? All those in favour? Yes, so it's an aye. Thank you. Now, we've got 10 minutes before 10:30, and I think we've got time to run through the deliberations of the Audit and Risk Committee from yesterday, yes, yeah. It's a long time ago, I know.
No, it was yesterday. I just think that's very quick. You're normally supposed to give people 5 days notice of what's on the agenda.
It is on the agenda.
You got the material?
Well, that's the problem I was just going to allude to, Councillor.
I wonder how you're going to stretch 24 hours in 5 days.
Sure. That's been the conundrum for us over the last...
I want to see this done.
That's been the conundrum for us, is getting that information to you. The paper at... what number is it? 6, I think.
Item 6.
Item 6. The paper had a good go at trying to capture the likely outcomes of that subcommittee meeting yesterday. And so if you... it's 7, I need to go back one. If you go back to your agenda item 6, what actually transpired, or in addition to what you're seeing in your paper there are a number of resolutions or recommendations from the subcommittee to this committee, and if you are of a mind to consider these now, we could do those now if they're of such a nature that they won't require that sort of 5 days odd of deliberation or consideration. Do you want to have a look at those and make a call as to whether you want to receive them now or not?
Could I suggest that it's not that easy? Could we have them printed off and circulated, and then people can look at them as they go through the meeting, and if they feel comfortable about them, we can then come back and deal with them later? I would feel happier if people had them in writing in front of them rather than flicked up and down on a flickery screen at yeah.
So you're comfortable with that? We could just defer this item till midday or something like that, or short of midday, and do something else. You happy to do that way? Just defer this for a minute or two. There's nothing outrageous amongst them, apart from the remuneration for.
Believe that in some senses is minor technical.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. So we'll do that. We'll just defer that again, Madam Secretary. I'll distribute those for you and have a discussion. So that gives us time before 10:30 to go to the representation review. Can we cover that in 10 minutes, do you think?
Yes.
No?
Yes.
Yes.
Well,
Okay, let's do that. Let's go to...
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
10.
Again, look, I'll just highlight that this paper is for your information. It's really to outline the process that lies ahead. It's been largely developed by Mrs. Hooper as the electoral officer, as opposed to her role as governance manager for Hawke's Bay Regional Council. But it is a process at the end. The council must determine by resolution the number of constituencies that the Hawke's Bay Regional Council will have, the name and boundaries of those constituencies, and the number of members proposed to be elected. So attached to your agenda under separate cover are a number of additional statutory pieces of information for you to understand what is actually involved. And the paper just really goes through the background as to why a review is being undertaken now, and that's because we're required to undertake a representation review every 6 years, and the last one was completed in 2012. And there's some information about what happened there. As I said, the statutory requirements, and probably as importantly, in attachment 2 is the, on page 52, is the project plan, which looks at the timing of the review, and clearly that's part of the issue potentially is that we are going to be engaging with the public on this in a similar timeline to the long-term plan. So there will be a fair bit of information potentially going out to the public from us at that time, and we really just wanted to draw your attention to that. But yes, as I said, page 52 really sets out the key project milestones that we have. Obviously we're down to the third line, which is the paper today, but we've on Friday, yes, we had held a workshop with members of the Māori Committee on their potential feedback on Māori or the view around Māori constituencies. They have agreed to hold 4 huia iwi throughout Hawke's Bay, starting next Wednesday in Wairoa, and they will be seeking the input or feedback from tangata whenua on that, so that they can then in turn provide potentially a consensus view back to council, but not necessarily. They acknowledge that they may not have a consensus view on it, but that they will definitely be providing feedback to the council within the next couple of months. We had in our project plan, we have a Māori constituency options paper to council for the 25th of October, which is your 5 weeks from now. What we are indicating, or what we're asking, is actually that as a result of the huia iwi, which are being held over the next few weeks, that there be potentially a special council meeting held ahead of the next Environment and Services Committee meeting on the 15th of November to consider the feedback from the Māori Committee. They're not confident that they'll be ready to provide you with a view by the 25th of October, or certainly to provide us with one the week before that, which is when the agenda paper would be required to be done. So that's one minor issue there, but other than that, the process has been set out in this paper, and we're happy to take questions. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Councillors, this topic has the potential to occupy one's minds and divert attention for quite some time. So we're going to have to get our heads around and give a clear steer to staff around, particularly around numbers and boundaries, etc. But have you got any questions that you'd like to raise? Councillor Barker.
Am I correct in that I recall this is the third time this council has considered matters subject to the electoral system?
So, third time recently you're talking about?
Yes, this year.
Yes, that's right. There has been, or there is about to be, obviously the representation review. There is the issue of Māori constituencies, and then the issue that you voted on last month was around the electoral system, first past the post or single transferable voting. So yes, 3.
I just want to say it makes it challenging for coherent decision making when we come at this with a bite here, a bite there, a bite somewhere else. And I just feel this process has been less than satisfactory from a governor's point of view. That's my first point I'd make to you.
Look, Councillor, I understand these are driven by statutory timetables, but I don't know whether Mrs Hooper can give us further information on that. So, I mean, it seems odd to me that we had a September deadline in statute by which we had to make decisions on the electoral system. November, we've got a statutory deadline on which to make decisions in relation to Māori seats. Now, I agree that the community should probably have these things all bundled in one, but for good or ill, they do seem to be disaggregated. Is that my understanding?
But that's not the issue. That's not the point. the point is that when we got this the first time, we should have had a paper which set out what all the timelines were, how disjunct they were, whatever it was, and then set us through what we would need to be considered, rather than have one come here without sight of the other, another one come through disjointed from that, and then this third one. I just want to say this is, to me, a less than satisfactory process, because we've not had the sight of this right at the beginning, the totality of it, so we can see it in its thing. It's been dumped on as 1, 2, 3, and I just want to express my concern about this. This is a lack of management of this. We're supposed to have governance management, but we don't seem to have it here, in my view.
Thank you.
I'm just frustrated by it.
Yes, I can understand your frustration, Councillor, and driven by individual statutory deadlines, but nevertheless, an overview, umbrella view could have been useful. But however,
it's all known beforehand.
Yeah, Councillor Belford, you've got a question.
2 questions. Just can you refresh me as to what an elector can, where electors' right to demand electoral system poll? What can an elector demand?
So that's 5% of the electors within the region.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, in the case of Hawke's Bay Regional Council, it'll be around about 5,500 electors.
And they can demand what?
So there's 2 things that they could demand. Sorry, they could demand a poll around the establishment of Maori constituencies.
Okay.
And they could.
STV.
The electoral system. The electoral system is the other one.
First opposed to STV.
Yeah.
Okay, so if neither of those materialize,
Yes.
then and if the feedback from the Maori community is we're not interested in Maori seats, then all of these, if there are any other issues, anything else that we think is broken that we wish to address, it wouldn't happen until the second half of next year. So if I'm reading this correctly.
That's right. So yes.
So it'd be off the table while we're doing all this other LTP stuff.
Yes, so if the electoral system is settled, if you like, if the issue of Maori constituencies is settled, then the only outstanding matter is the number of constituencies and the number of representatives and their boundaries. And so really the only obvious issue that you might be looking at is, are there special communities of interest that are outside the plus or minus 10% ratios for population representation?
Which was the issue traversed the last time.
Correct, yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan. Welcome, Councillor Bevan, that's what I meant to say.
Thrice welcome.
Mr. Chairman,
Councillor Dick.
I don't find this complicated or challenging at all. In fact, I'd like to move that the council adopt in principle the status quo for the next triennium in terms of constituencies, boundaries and numbers of councillors per constituency.
Before, would you mind if I just canvassed it a little bit before accepting that recommendation, Councillor? Are there any other strenuous views around our current, or do we need to somehow workshop? I mean, we do have some issues around these deviants in Wairoa and Central Hawke's Bay.
And Napier.
And Napier, some deviants in Napier as well. In terms of those outlying issues. So we're needing to get a determination from the Commission as to the acceptability of that. So the question to you before accepting the recommendation is there a high level of agreement and consideration around from councillors about this proceeding with our status quo? Is there a need for a workshop or other consideration around the numbers?
I would like to workshop it. I've got some thoughts and ideas that I'd like to share with councillors before I went totally public on them. So I just don't want to race to that. That's not the recommendation. I don't want to race to the status quo until we've had a really good discussion on this.
That's fine. I mean, obviously you can move a recommendation, but I just want to think this through substantially. Councillor Barker.
You've got two different views here. One's a workshop, one wants to move to making a decision.
Mr. Mohi.
Just in terms of the Māori constituencies, this was brought up at the last Maori committee meeting by the Heratanga Tai Whenua and suggested that we go back and ask our people. In Tamatia's situation, we have a monthly meeting. So on the 9th of October, we will be having our Tai Whenua meeting and advertising it as an opportunity to listen to the staff from the council explain the situation. A week later, we're having our Maori committee meeting in Waipukurau, so that'll be on the agenda for the public to have an input. And that's one way of keeping the costs down as far as central goes. But the other question is, and I'll ask Mike to speak after me, if you wouldn't mind. The other question is, if indeed the Māori asked for it, there's the two questions, does the council have the ability to say, yes, we'll test it at the next election, or do we have to go out and get the 10%? If they decided they wanted the constituencies. And a third question is, then is there less council laws? If indeed there was two Māori
representatives
seats.
Yeah, I'll get Ms. Lambert to answer. You're asking a significant question, but going back to where we started this immediate dialogue, that issue is relevant to both the numbers and constituency makeup. So a determination by council now to proceed to the status quo has impacts on that representation. That's why I was keen to traverse it before we moved in that direction. But having said that, I wonder whether you could answer the question.
I'll ask Leanne.
And the question is, in terms of Māori representation, if council determined by resolution to move to Māori constituencies, can that be accepted and moved upon? As I understand it, it'll be subject to a petition by the public, a 10% petition by the public in any event. But can I get someone that knows these things to answer the question?
Sorry, in relation to the establishment of Māori constituencies, it's a decision for council to make. So in making that decision, they can either decide to establish, which then requires public notification advising that the only way to countermand that would be by a poll of electors of at least 5% to demand a poll be undertaken, and then that would be binding for the next, if they did it within the timeframes of the 21st of February next year, that would be in effect for the 2019 and 22 elections. Okay, council could choose to make no decision and just go with the status quo, in which case there's no requirement to make a public notification or do anything like that. Or they could resolve not to establish and then choose to advise the public that if they wanted to demand a poll, they could do that. So there's really about 3 choices for council.
The reason for the question was so that I'm informed when people ask me, rather than stating that either way.
Mr. Paku.
Sorry, you haven't answered the other question.
Yeah, about the number of seats.
The number of
the reason,
seats be reduced?
Yeah, the reason that the Māori constituencies question needs to be answered first before the representation review is undertaken is because the final determination on the number of representatives, what the boundaries are, what the constituency names are, would be determined through that review, the representation review.
But it need not necessarily mean that we restrict ourselves to simply 9 councillors. That's the question that needs to be answered clearly, so that you could have 11 councillors with two Māori wards, if that's what the decision was.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Mr. Paku, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr Chairman. Look, just to give a bit of clarification around, so this is really, this is about the second or third time this has come to the Māori Advisory Committee over the years. And it's the first time the Māori Committee have actually said, well, actually, let's take this back out to our Māori community, because at the end of the day, the question really belongs to them and not to the committee. So there was general agreement around that happening, as Liz stated earlier on. There was a workshop held last Friday where that feeling was once again echoed, and that we would work alongside the council staff and call in huia iwi. And it's just to test the water at this stage as to what is the feeling amongst the Māori community to having Māori wards. We're not putting any obligation on the council at this point of time or on our communities. If there's general acceptance that they would like to explore the possibilities, that's what we will bring back to council, to give council an idea of where the Māori population's sitting. As Leanne has stated, there are 3 options there that council can take. It's up to councillors to decide what option they decide to go with. I think the most important thing here is actually the opportunity for the tangata whenua to actually voice to you what their preference is, without delving into whether there should be a poll, should not be a poll, whether there should be a referendum, whether there should not be a referendum. I think it's just to answer that question back to you, what is their opinion as to around Māori wards.
Yeah.
Kia ora.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. I just wanted to, I mean, it's clearly your right to move, and just hang on, I've got the chair, thank you. It's your right to move a recommendation now.
Which is seconded.
And which you've indicated is seconded, but I'm wanting to point out to you that it does cut across another processes which is going on. I'll take a question from Mr. Bailey, Councillor Bailey.
Well, can I speak to the motion?
No, you can't. Mr.
That's
Bailey,
unusual.
Councillor Bailey. We're still in question time.
Thank you, Chair. From my, I kind of got to agree with Councillor Barker in that the reason that's made it difficult because we've had these 2 or 3 issues all sort of come at separate times rather than together, but I'm slowly getting my head around all this. So what you're suggesting is that if we made a decision now to keep the status quo in terms of the representation and constituencies that we've got already, that may be superseded, or we may have to change that decision if we get feedback from the Māori committee, which sort of or the Māori community that indicates to us that we should look at it in a different manner, either the number of councillors, or whether we drop the number of councillors and add Maori constituency or Maori wards in there or whatever. So we're kind of putting, it would be fair to say that if we were to move a motion to keep the status quo today, we could well be putting the cart before the horse.
Look, happy to receive a recommendation from 2 councillors who want to move in that direction and test that out if that's their wish.
Yep.
I would point out, in addition to it being a simple recommendation, is that a resolution, there's a recommendation to council, a council resolution cannot be taken in any event. It can't be taken before the 31st of March next year. So, the 1st of March. So even if you make a recommendation now, it will be ultra vires at council, at our next council meeting. But if you want to proceed, that's fine.
Yes, I do, because the intention is to get a starting point and establish a position in principle, subject to these other matters being dealt with. And the reason why I think we should do that today is, let's try and keep things simple. Let's not overcomplicate things and again overload our staff and everyone else, which they've told us they are meeting, getting to stress points. But the key issue in terms of the intention of this resolution in principle is to ensure that the communities of Central Hawke's Bay and Wairoa are protected as to representation by elected members. Simple as that. It's been debated. It's been considered by the Local Government Commission 3 times now. I see absolutely no reason to upset that. And if there is a decision to have Maori constituencies, then they come on top, in my view. So that doesn't complicate that.
Thank you, Councillor Dick. I just want to clarify that your recommendation is, in fact, to retain the status quo of the current constituency and representatives. Is that clarified? Current constituency that covers the representative. So that's your recommendation. Councillor Hewitt, do you want to speak to that?
Retain as the framework the present structure which provides for a elected member from Wairoa and Central Hawke's Bay, one from where do you come from? Narara.
We've got the point.
And 3 each from Hastings.
So thank you, Councillor. So speaking as a second to Councillor Hewitt, do you want to speak to the recommendation?
Thank you. I like to think if it isn't broke, don't fix it. And I certainly look forward to. I'd like to come along to your meeting, Mike, at the with the Tai Whenua in October, and I welcome their views. But so I'm not saying that we don't listen to them at all. But I saw in the Central Hawke's Bay Mail this week quite a large ad, and it had regional council logos, and I'm really not sure what it was. It was some prescription thing that had to be put out, and I just thought, we waste a lot of time and money communicating on stuff that people aren't overly interested in, and then when there are issues that are really, really important, like plan changes that have been proposed, plan changes, I don't think we're getting the message out. So I think we've got a lot of our communications around the wrong way, and in terms of what people need to be hearing from the council, I wouldn't be confusing the population with something that I don't think is broken.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Belford.
I am astonished to be firmly in support of the motion and agree with what both speakers have said. The issue of the basic existing constituencies has been traversed a number of times. We've had 2 elections on the current makeup. It's time to let that bed in and not further confuse people as to who represents what and tinker with boundaries and for what purpose escapes me. But I'm happy to see if there is a response from the Maori community that Maori seats are something desired, that, as Councillor Dick says, can be layered on. That seems to be what the most logical outcome would be if it's called for. And so it does take a lot off the table and avoid a lot of confusion to just say that as far as the basic current setup is concerned, it does adequately provide for 2 outlier, so to speak, parts of the community that don't otherwise by population fit into the scheme. So that issue has been very thoroughly examined, it seems to me, and I can't imagine we're going to invent any other mousetrap that better speaks to the issues involved. So I'm going to support the motion.
So we've had 3 speakers for the motion. Is there one against, please?
Not so much against. If the minutes can capture in regards to the potential for a consideration around Māori seats going forward, based on the outcomes.
Thank you, Mr. Paku. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. To my mind, it's simply a matter of timing. Until we get an idea of if there's a desire for Māori wards and what that looks like, I don't think we should preempt that discussion by beating down what we've currently got. It's certainly not that I'm not interested in having representation from Wairoa and Central Hawke's Bay. It's certainly not that I want to actually change the current makeup. It's just that until we get that feedback, I think we're putting the cart before the horse, so therefore I'll be voting against this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Graham.
Yeah, I'm going to vote against the motion too, not because I'm against having seats in Central Hawke's Bay and Wairoa. I'm very strongly for having seats in those 2 areas, but I just think that this is confusing the issue. The recommendation here is that we take it back and we have a good look at it, and we're carrying on talking about it. Nobody here wants to take away those seats. or change the boundaries. But that's just one part of this discussion, and that it concerns me that we are leapfrogging the entire discussion with a single part and just confusing the rest. I do want to have, and I'm looking forward to the Māori committee coming back and from Tana Te Whenua and saying what they want. And I'm really keen to hear that, and I'm really keen, I don't want this to usurp any opportunities on that. So I'm still a little bit confused whether it does or not. And as I'm confused, I have to vote against it.
Councillor Barker.
Well, I'm kind of in Councillor Bailey and Councillor Graham's position as well. I just come back to, Alan, you might say that you find this really simple, and when I say this is made more complicated than the way we manage it, is that I'm somehow thick. I'm not. What I think we're missing here is that we should have, rather than wait until some legislative timeline stubbed our toe, react, and then wait until the next one stubbed our toe and then react, we could have managed this better by having a paper quite some time ago was scoped out what was going to happen in the future and put it all together so we could have visibility of the totality of it. For my part, I thought when we made a decision last time to endorse the voting system we had, not have a poll on STV, we were in fact ipso facto settling on the current structure we had. Because you can't have an STV vote if you're going to have a constituency in Wairoa. STV requires multi-member because it's a single transferable vote. STV requires multi-member, and my recollection when I went through this extensively was you need 3 members minimum for an STV poll to work properly, and maybe even 5. So having a constituency in Wairoa and a constituency in Central Hawke's Bay meant STV was not operable, and we were therefore settling on the constituency at the same time. Now we're coming back to another discussion around this, and it just frustrates me that we haven't got sight of it. And I'm supporting Councillor Graham's position that I'm not going to vote against it because I don't want seats in Wairoa. I do. I'm not going to vote against it because I don't want a seat in Central Hawke's Bay, because I do. But I do think we need to have a thorough discussion so we get the totality of this in our head. We've had a piece here, a piece there, and a piece somewhere else, and I don't think this is a good way to make decisions. So I'm all sitting down having a think, and I also want to wait until we hear what the Māori community have to say about their aspirations here, because they might come up with something completely different and unexpected, and we might like it. And let's not preempt that. We're putting ourselves in a position where we are. I don't want to do that. Let's wait till all the cards are on the table and we can see the totality of it and make a considered decision with each element balancing off one against the other.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Councillor Wilson, have you got something to say on this matter?
Well, you made the offer. I will. I thought you 3-4-3 against, you're going to put it. But first point I'll make, the people of Wairoa gratefully accept the offer of 5 seats from Councillor Barker. And we would go to STV if that was the case. I'll just put it out there. As you can see in the paper, the Hastings constituency has changed a couple of times in recent times. It was as it is today. It went to at large, I think, and then there was a move by the Hastings members, which the council supported at the time, to go north-south. As you can see by the paper, it was soundly defeated. In fact, Lawrence Ewell at the time gave me a wink and he said, "You're stuffed, mate. We're going to win this one," and they did. So we went back to where we started, which was 3 for Hastings and 1 Ngāti Roro. I'm going to support this. Bewildered as I say this, but I too support the view of Councillor Belford here on the basis that it is yet just a small piece of a bigger puzzle that people are confused about, and let's bed it in. It's working. It's survived a couple of iterations through the Local Government Commission. They support the what on the face of it looks like a huge discrepancy of 50% versus the plus or minus 10 for Wairoa, 22% in Central Hawke's Bay, I think it is. But even the bigger constituencies get just outside that 10%. range. I think some certainty for the community. It has been working. Let's look at the addition of Māori seats if that's what that community wants.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bevan, welcome, and please express yourself fully.
Thank you, Chair. So I've come into this debate and discussion a little bit late, so forgive me if I haven't heard all of the elements that have been discussed around the table, but I think I'm in support in principle of what's being proposed here on the basis that, as Councillor Belford said, there's no better mousetrap that we can think of, so we can perhaps dispense with one element of what we need to consider here and then focus our attention on some of the others that we may wish to change at some point in the future, and that's fine. But I do have a question which I think might be a point of order question, so I'm hoping for some guidance from Leanne on it, and that is, if we pass this motion, are we also locking in the names of the current wards? Because I don't think that the ward I represent should be called Nararora. I don't think it's the right name.
I'll ask Mrs. Hooper to answer that question. There are specific issues around the naming of wards that she may be able to address.
No, this won't set anything in stone, because the actual end resolution determining the representation arrangements, the first proposal cannot be made in law until after the 1st of March. And then it has to go through the process of public submissions for at least a month after that is publicly notified, and the opportunity for people to submit and be heard on their submissions prior to making a final decision, which needs to be made before the 12th of September, I think.
Thank you. You've sufficiently answered, Teresa, really. Look, I haven't spoken yet, and I'm about to now. Toro, yes, my apologies.
I support Councillor Graham's idea about a workshop, so I'll be voting against the motion. And also I need to go back to my people and see whether or not they want a Ngāti Pāhua award.
Thank you, Toro. And look, I'm also very strongly against this recommendation for some of the reasons already expressed, but particularly the way in which it tramples upon the processes we've already set in place in terms of Māori constituencies. What this smacks of, in my view, is the council stepping over and overriding any reasonable dialogue and discussion that the Māori community might have about it, and I'd be very disappointed, and I'm very pleased that it's a mere academic exercise, but even in itself I think is damaging to our council's engagement with the Māori community when we step up to the plate with a recommendation that says we want the status quo, and to be blowed with anything that the Māori community have considered. I think it's grossly premature, and it is a situation where we damage our reputation yet again with the Māori community by deliberations of council overriding considerations of the Māori community. Your right of reply, Councillor Dick.
Yeah, well, Mr. Chairman, the way you describe it is absolutely not how it's intended, nor how it will be. And if there's any likelihood of damage being done to relationships, it would be by people taking literally the position that you've outlined. The resolution is simply, and it states in principle, to create a starting point based on what we already know, that allows then the rest of the processes to proceed, and for iwi to consider what their view may be in terms of Maori constituencies, and it creates nothing more than a presumption that if that happened, then the Maori constituencies would go on top of the existing representation arrangements. The other thing is that we've got miles more important stuff to do than to be spending half a day workshopping and reiterating everything that's been said here on this matter. We're better to deal with these things simply and concisely, and get on, deal with the real work that faces us.
I'll put the recommendation. That's 1, 2 and 3, I take it, is...
We'll just take, if we can just take that one first.
Well, we'll take...
No, the resolution is very specific.
The resolution is very specific. It's not this one. It's not that one.
We've got a recommendation in front of us on the paper that says we'll receive the report. The second, number 2 recommendation is as was earlier stated. So that's about the status quo scenario.
Well, Leanne, have you got what I said?
I think so.
Perhaps read it out.
You might clarify the wording of it to make Councillor Curtin's comments look as ridiculous as they were.
Oh, look.
Get his car towed.
Well,
It's in my spot.
that's one option. And it's out of order, Councillor, and won't be repeated, otherwise you'll have to take a hike.
So is that the new 2?
That's correct.
So we've got 1,
what you see
session
down
notes,
there.
the review report from the start. 2, corporate citizens.
Yeah, 2 needs to come out.
That's the resolutions on the floor.
That's it, and it then provides for the process of consideration of Maori ward options to be considered based from a framework.
Well, that's changing substantially the recommendation. I think as it was.
That's how I put it.
That's what I understood it to be.
That was what was moved, that's what seconded. That's what you've taken to close the debate on.
That's it, but with the addition of any others, I think it's going to be on the so that's the recommendation.
That's the resolution.
It's a resolution.
It's a recommendation.
No, that's the resolution. We're voting on, not a recommendation.
It is a recommendation.
Point of order, Chair.
Point of order, Councillor Bailey.
You don't want to take 1 and 2 separately, or?
Oh, we can take them separately if you like. So we'll take recommendation 1 to receive and note the representation review staff report. All those in favour of that course of action? All those against? Carried. Recommendation 2. You all familiar? You all happy with that recommendation? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour of the recommendation?
Aye.
Those against? No. Division called for?
Yes, please.
Those in favour of the recommendation, raise your hand. That's 5 for the recommendation. Those against the recommendation? 6 against. The recommendation's lost.
You didn't have your hand up.
No, I'm not allowed to vote.
Oh, look.
I'm not
my
permitted to
apologies.
vote, and I didn't vote.
Can we have those against the recommendation please raise their hand? So that's 6 against the recommendation? So the recommendation is lost.
Yep. We haven't had to do a recount.
Mr. Chairman, I think if we put an amendment to that motion, subject to the feedback from the Māori community as to whether they want Māori wards, I think that should suffice.
I would second that amendment.
Well, hang on. Can I just get a consideration of we've moved a recommendation. It's been lost. are we interested to have a further recommendation?
We've just had one moved.
No, Councillor, it was an amendment, and I'm suggesting that that's out of order.
Well, could I just speak the point of order? I thought I heard very clearly it being suggested that a fresh resolution for the council to consider was that up there, plus, what were your words?
Reserving the option.
Yeah.
So, and then if that was moved, I was happy to second that as a resolution.
I'm happy to receive a third recommendation. Do you want to state the recommendation?
I'd like us to consider the second recommendation on the page.
So we're looking for a
Mr. Chairman, you've just got one.
Point of order, there's a motion and a second for it.
He's trying to state his motion.
So basically, Mr. Chairman.
So we've got a seconder?
Yeah.
Thank you.
For addition to that, as a new...
Yes. So it's just capturing the words that Councillor Dick spoke, but the motion didn't capture it. That's all I'm suggesting, that we actually put the words back in there that he spoke of, which was subject to feedback from the Māori community as to whether there will be Māori wards or not. So it's the status quo, as Councillor Dick has said. If there's to be Māori wards, subject from the community, then it comes over the top. It'll fall where it falls. You don't have to decide that until March next year.
So the wording of the wording of the recommendation.
I want to see what it says first. Subject to advice.
So it's subject to the question of Māori wards.
Subject to
further advice on the subject of marriage.
Yes. Yep.
Everyone happy with that the wording of that recommendation?
Can I just say, advice from, who's going to give us the advice?
Well,
The Māori Committee?
Yes. Well, the Māori Committee.
Via the Māori Committee?
Yes.
So one would say, subject to advice from the Māori Committee on behalf of the Māori community. To be very clear where we're getting it from.
So you still need 5,500?
No. We're not asking that question at this point in time. Yep.
Is everyone happy with that recommendation as it's enunciated? So we've got a mover, we've got a seconder. Do you want to speak to that? So you've had some words. Do you want to speak to that? Anyone? All right, I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour of the recommendation? Aye. Those against? That's carried. I think we'll break from morning tea.